Hi, this is Vrinda. I'm here in the UK. I'm here for a study break, and that is the reason for my absence. And while I'm here, I thought I should try to show you around some of the places that I'm visiting in the UK. And currently, I am right in the heart of the city called Oxford. So when we hear the word Oxford, we think of it as just the university, but the university is actually named after the city, which is part of a larger county, or I think which is the equivalent of districts in India, called Oxfordshire. Oxfordshire, I think, in the pronunciation here. But the place where I am right now is also the heart of the university here, the heart of the old part of the university. And I'm standing here for a reason, because I have to show you a building which has its own history, but it's also a strange building in the sense that its future is also decided for it. I'm standing right outside the university church, which is this building. It's I think the full name is probably the University Church of Virgin Mary, and it was the tallest building in Oxford when it was built. And now the interesting part is that by a legal decree, it's been ordered that no building in Oxford will ever be taller than this building. So no matter how many buildings come up in the city, this is one building that's always going to be the tallest in Oxford. And I think when you walk across Oxford, what stands out is something that has also been documented in literature, and it's something that people of the city also prize as part of their identity, which is a quote from the poet Matthew Arnold, who talked about the city as the city of dreaming spires. And that's what you also see in this church and in other buildings around this square where I am. This is called the Ratcliffe Square, and there are colleges all around. The central library, the main library of the town, of the university, the Bodleian Library, is also here. It's spread across the university. It's also got offshoots in cities outside of Oxford. But this is one of the principal units of the Bodleian Library. This is called the Ratcliffe Camera, and there's nothing in it which has anything to do with any camera or photography. But the term camera also refers to a room. And so this is a reading room of the Bodleian Library, basically. I think this was built in the 1700s, probably the mid-1700s. But the Bodleian Library goes far back. And I think I'll tell you a little bit about the history of this library first, and then we'll come back to why there are all these blue curtains around the Ratcliffe Camera, and the interesting ways in which history and modern politics and colonialism interacts in this very small cobble street space. And then towards the end of this episode, we'll also talk about the history of the ox and how it's been recorded along the roads of Oxford, and why the city and the university gets its name. So there is a history of tussles regarding which is the oldest college in Oxford, and I think that happens when you have so much history crammed up in such a small space. But I think the Balliol College, Merton College, University College, these are probably the oldest ones. And right now I'm in this square called the quad of the Bodleian Library, and all around me the buildings that you see, these are all parts of segments of the Bodleian Library. And the library in itself has a very, very interesting history which works parallel, which develops parallelly to the history of printing in Europe, and works in tandem with the rise of the book and reading cultures. So the place where we were earlier, the the university church, was where the first reading rooms were established in Oxford in the early 1300s. But that is before the printing press was actually invented. And this is about 200 or 300 years after teaching first began in Oxford. So we're talking about early 1300s. That was the first reading room. And then in 1447, this man called Duke Humphrey, he donated 281 manuscripts to the library here. And by that time's standard, that was a huge donation, because at that time only 20 books existed in Oxford, and this was a very fun-staffed set-up, basically, institution. So when they got that donation from the Duke, that was considered a huge treasure, and they then built a reading room which exists even today. And this reading room is very special because a lot of us have seen this particular reading room in the Harry Potter books. Now the problem with Duke Humphrey's room is that you can't shoot inside, you can't take any photos. So while I've been there, I can't show you what the place looked like. But these photos that you see on your screen now have been taken off from the net, and these are the only very few limited images of the room that are available on the net. And even today, the room contains some of the rarest books in England. It contains the first folio of Shakespeare, which was published, a collection of his plays that was published right after his death. It contains manuscripts of the Bible from the 3rd century, so that means about 1700-year-old manuscripts. It contains a copy of the first Bible, the Gutenberg Bible, which sort of set in motion the history of printing in the world. But for Duke Humphrey himself, the history is not as grand, because the books that he donated were all probably burnt up or seized and just, sort of thrown about in the Reformation movement of the 1500s. So this is where all of that history was playing out, and today I'm standing here talking to you on this camera, but these are also places that have stored and recorded a lot of history. So I'm standing here next to a very famous door in Oxford. The doors are beautiful in Oxford, and this one predates its legacy in a way. This is the door that was the inspiration for the novel series Narnia. The author of the book series was a professor here, and if you look at the door, and it's also now a very famous film franchise, this is the lion that was the face of the movies and the books. The lion called Aslan in the movies, in the books, I mean. And then along the doors, if you see, that is also the face of a character called Mr. Tumnus. And that's how Oxford is. It's history and literature and philosophy and music, all of this lives in these alleys and these streets. But again, now I am at the Radcliffe Square. This is just across the Radcliffe Square, and the Radcliffe camera that you see behind me. This is part of the Bodleian Libraries, as I told you, and the Bodleian is very interesting also because it's called a legal deposit library, which means that every book that is published in the UK, I think, has to have at least one copy with this library. And the library also now has offshoot storage units, so they have a collection of more than 1 crore books, which is a huge collection. But when you come to the Radcliffe camera these days, something stands out, and that is a particularly visually dissonant object that surrounds the Radcliffe camera. Is this very stunning blue net that has been put up around the Radcam. It's called the Radcam, Radcliffe camera, Radcam, around the park, which has been done in response to days or almost 2 months of protests by the students of Oxford in response to the atrocities committed by Israel against Gaza. The Oxford Action for Palestine set up embankments. Basically, they put up tents here and they lived here. Some students lived here, took turns and stayed on here in protest, demanding accountability from the University of Oxford to reveal the details of the funding that they receive from the money that comes from Israel and is used to fund the attacks on Gaza. It's also part of a larger movement that has taken place across universities in the world, starting with the US and then going up to Cambridge and then coming here to Oxford. And it's also happened across different universities in Europe and also across universities in Asia. And the response mostly has been quite volatile from the authorities. Even in Oxford, there was legal action taken against these students, in response to which they finally left their posts, and they've said that they'll look up other ways of continuing with their protest. All that remains now are these small flags that you see along the grill. And these are flags, these are the colors of the Palestinian flag that you see here, and behind them you see the spires, the dreaming spires of Oxford. And when you walk through Oxford, you can't forget that this is money that came from the colonies. This is money that has a long history of colonial aggression, colonial oppression, slavery, exploitation of peoples across the world. The Palestine Action in Cambridge also has done similar protests. Just a few weeks ago, they painted red the Senate House, a very famous building again on their campus. They painted it red, signifying the blood of the Palestinian people. And that reminded me of how protests happen, because that was something that happened last year. From the Senate House in Cambridge to the Senate hearings in the US, the protests have been talking about the same thing. When Anthony Blinken was appearing and testifying before the Senate House there, his testimony was interrupted by protesters who walked in with red painted on their hands, signifying the fact that America is complicit in the atrocities that Israel was committing and is committing on Gaza. The Hamas Health Ministry says that more than 38,000 people have died in Gaza as a result of the attack, but the Lancet magazine has put out an estimate that more than 186,000 people have died directly and indirectly as a result of the atrocities that Israel is committing there. Walking around in Oxford, you also see it as a city of people and not just students. Students certainly give it a very mixed social profile, and you can tell that it is largely oriented towards its student population. But Oxford is also the site of a very popular cars manufacturing unit, I later got to know. And just a stroll around any of the markets also tells you that it has a very robust, a very bustling tourist culture. There are all kinds of souvenir shops, there are a lot of eateries, there are beautiful markets, there are a lot of Harry Potter shops, and you can tell that it's a big attraction here, also because of the fact that the films were also shot in parts of the city. There is, for example, a very cute little Alice in Wonderland shop which is right across from the Christchurch College, where we will go to in a bit, which is also the site of the Harry Potter films. But in the middle of all of that, you see that just like any other city, there is quite a bit of homelessness in Oxford. In India, we are not strangers to homelessness, but that is something that one does not readily think of when the name Oxford comes up. It's a very lively city around the university area, but it is also quite fragmented in terms of its demography. For example, the newer immigrant populations and the older, whiter populations live in sort of separate areas of the city. And while the immigrant area is much more culturally diverse and I've been told that it has better food, the older and more affluent areas have better living facilities. So all of this just really goes to show how, like any other place, Oxford also has its own urban perils to reckon with. It's not just the university, it's a whole city like any other. But for now, let's go to the stairs of the Museum of Science History, which stands next to the Sheldonian Theatre, which is named after a chancellor of the university. It was set up in the 1600s, and while it's called a theatre, the fun part is that plays were not really performed here till the 1950s. The boundary wall of the theatre and the museum has all these faces. Now I don't know whose statues these are. They're not named. They might have been, I don't know, chancellors or God knows, probably donors. But looking in these, I also realized that the history of an institution such as Oxford, or many of these historical institutions, is very masculine. It's a very patriarchal, very male-oriented history. And in Oxford, for example, women were not allowed to enter the university till the 1870s. That is the first time, I think in 1879, when Lady Margaret Hall and the Somerville College open up, and that is when the first women come to Oxford. And it's not until the 1970s, 1974 in fact, when the male colleges begin to open up for women. So the history of women in Oxford is very recent, even though Oxford itself prizes for being nearly 1,000 years old. But when it comes to women's rights and the presence of women in these corridors, Oxford has a very, very short history. I'm at the site of the Christ Church College now, one of the oldest colleges in Oxford, but I think it's probably known best as the Harry Potter College. But I think a far more interesting history of this college is of its foundation, because it was established by Henry VIII, and it was in response to his demand of wanting to divorce his wife Catherine of Aragon. Now, within the English church, within the Roman Catholic Church, that wasn't allowed. So he broke away from the church and he established the Anglican Church, and this building then was set up in response to that rebellion. It was his answer, his proclaiming of his power, that he was above the church itself, which was for the British monarch at that time a big move, because the king derived his authority from the church. So it looks beautiful, it's awe-inspiring, it's beautiful. There are the meadows up ahead, the Christ Church meadows, which are open for all students and everybody in Oxford really. And while this campus has gained a lot of fame now owing to its association with Harry Potter, it's also stuck in a time capsule of sorts. And at times when there's nobody in the corridor, you can almost imagine how it must have looked like 500 years ago from now. And they've managed to preserve the essence of this building and many such other buildings within Oxford, which have survived the test of time along with some help from human hands. I bring you to the end of the small tour with a view of one of the oldest colleges in Oxford. This is the Balliol College, and I think it was established somewhere between the 1100s or the 1200s. And further along this road, you see the Sheldonian Theatre, which we just were just a bit ago. And then further down the road, there's Trinity College. Down that road and towards the right, there is the Radcliffe Camera, where we saw the Gaza embankments. and then this is a road where you have the oldest college in Oxford, but you also have these new up and coming hotels in the city, Boswell and Co. I don't have no idea what this hotel is like inside. I probably can't even go inside. This is one thing about Oxford, that they really are very territorial about spaces. You can't really walk in everywhere. But the interesting thing again about Oxford is the name, and how that name ties to a longer history of pastoral cultures, of warfare, of kingdoms fighting for land. Oxford is crisscrossed by two rivers, the Cherwell River and the Thames River. And the word Oxford comes from an old Saxon word which basically means the ford of the ox, meaning that there was shallow water here and the ox could cross over it. And that is why you see Oxford teeming with these sculptures of the ox. They're all over the city. You can buy miniatures, you can buy larger replicas of these kinds of oxen. And the cow or the ox or the bull is something that we are very used to on our roads in India, but in the UK or anywhere in Oxford, I have not seen a live cow, a living cow anywhere on the streets. So what they don't have, they seek out in a way, and then they install them on the roads. And while the term Oxonian is this badge of honor because it signifies that you went to Oxford, the truth is that you always carry an ox in your badge of honor. And I think that is this humor and this history that goes on in the legend of this place is what really makes it stand apart. And I'll close with a note of thanks to my friend Aditi, who gave me a wonderful tour of Oxford and has been very graciously recording my video today. And till next time, this is me, Vrinda, signing out.